Yo, what's up, snipers, and welcome back to our third episode of our Stanley Cup Finals rematch series. In last episode, we did the 2006 Stanley Cup Finals, which ended up in a sweep for Carolina. Now we go a decade in the past to 1996 with the Stanley Cup Finals between the Colorado Avalanche and the Florida Panthers. This series was a bit of a mismatch, as Colorado, who were in their first season coming over from Quebec, already had a stud roster. They acquired Patrick Waugh and Sandis Ozolinsh during the regular season, and they already had talented players like Joe Sakic, Peter Forsberg, Valery Kaminsky, etc. While the Florida Panthers came into the NHL in 1993 as an expansion team, were led by players such as Rob Niedermayer, Scott Mellenby, and one-time Vezina Trophy winning goaltender, the Beezer, John Van Beesbrook. Anyway, this series, as I said, was a bit of a mismatch, as the talented Colorado Avalanche would prevail in 4-game sweep to win their first ever Stanley Cup. The cup was won when German defender Uwe Krupp scored in triple overtime of game number 4 at the Miami Arena. Patrick Waugh also had 63 saves that game for a 1-0 shutout win, so it was a very good game for Colorado. They also had some really good games, such as in game 2 where they won 8-1, and I think the other 2 games were pretty close, if I remember correctly. Anyway, that's the little recap, so now let's get on to the jerseys for each team. Okay, so here are the jerseys for the Colorado Avalanche. So as you can see, I tried to make it look exactly the same. It doesn't look 100% accurate because the jerseys didn't have that full V on the bottom, but the colors look pretty identical. I used the actual Colorado colors from this season and then threw it onto the jersey with the logo, and then I also used the actual font. So it looks pretty decent. It's not 100% accurate, like I said, but it's pretty good. And then their away jersey is the darker one. Like I said, back in the 90s, the dark jerseys were the away ones, and the home jerseys were the light ones. So it's pretty much just reversed. It looks pretty nice. And then didn't have an alternate that year. They had an alternate in, like, I think it came out in like 2000 something. They had one that's a Colorado across the jersey. So these were their 2 jerseys at that point in time. Let's flip on over to the Florida Panthers. Okay, so here are their jerseys for the Florida Panthers. It's not 100% accurate because they actually had like stripes on the bottom, kind of. So, but it's got the same color scheme. It's got the same logo patch, which is the palm tree with the hockey stick, and then a decent job on the same font. And then there's the logo. I think it might be a bit too dark with that brown color, but it still looks pretty good. And yeah, that's their home jersey. Then their away jersey is just a red jersey. It almost looks like the one that they had back in 2014, I think, is their home jersey or an alternate jersey or something like that. And then obviously, like I said, they'd had no alternate. A lot of teams didn't have alternates back in those days. Anyways, now that I showed you guys that, let's flip on over to the lines for both teams. Okay, so starting off for the Florida Panthers here on the left side, we got Dave Lowry, who is the father of Adam Lowry of the Winnipeg Jets. He actually also went to the Stanley Cup Finals back in 2004 as a member of the Calgary Flames. He was more of a grinder defensive player. He did, though, lead the team in points during the playoff run with 18, I think it was, in the 22 games or 24 games they played. And on center, you got Stu Barnes, who was also in the 1999 Stanley Cup Finals as a member of the Buffalo Sabres. You guys would have seen that in the first episode if you watched it. If not, go check that out. It's a pretty good episode. It was the first one I made. So then on the right side here, we got Ray Shepard, who's a bit of an underrated sniper. He actually had one season where he put up 52 goals with the Detroit Red Wings. He put up a total of 657 points, including 357 goals by his retirement. He actually was also traded, though, by the Buffalo Sabres to the New York Rangers for only $1. Sounds kind of strange. That doesn't happen too often. I think it did back in those days a lot more, but yeah, that was a really weird deal. And here on the second line, we got Johan Garpenlov. Garpenlov was a Swedish forward, not a Russian forward like you would think with the last name, considering Ovs are always seem to be Russian players. He had a pretty short career that only lasted 609 games, and then he also managed to put up 311 points during that time span, so he was a decent player for the most part, mostly assists, and he played with the Detroit Red Wings, the San Jose Sharks, the Florida Panthers, and the Atlanta Thrashers before retiring in like 2001, I think it was. And at center, you got Rob Niedermayer. Rob Niedermayer didn't win a cup this year, and then he went to the Cup Finals in 2003 where he would face his brother Scott Niedermayer against the Devils, Anaheim versus the Devils, back in 2003. He ended up losing that series and not winning another cup, so he was lucky though, because in 2007, Scott Niedermayer, his brother, came to the team, and they ended up winning the Stanley Cup that season against my Ottawa Senators. So he finally won a cup in 2007. He ended up retiring, I think, around 2011 with the Sabres, but he managed to win at least one cup, and it was with his brother nonetheless. Then on the right side, you got Scott Mellanby, who was a really good leader. He was the captain for the St. Louis Blues many times, and he also made the Cup Finals actually in his first full season with the Philadelphia Flyers back in 86-87. Unfortunately, they lost to the Edmonton Oilers, and he never actually won a Stanley Cup, I think, by his retirement, because he played with Atlanta as well and stuff like that. So that's Scott Mellanby. Now on the third line here, you got Bill Lindsay, and Bill Lindsay was one of those grinders. He put up decent points in the playoffs, but he never really scored a lot during his entire career, but he was a solid player to play against. He played 777 games and had 922 penalty minutes. Also, he could do a decent job at scoring, like not the greatest, but decent, respectable. 224 points in 777 games. Kind of funny, he retired with 777. Maybe it was a lucky number of his, I don't know. Then at center, you got the young Martin Straka, who was another really underrated player. He was age 23 at this time. He already played a couple seasons with, I think, Pittsburgh, Ottawa. He came over from during the regular season. He actually put up 717 points in 954 career games before he retired from the NHL in 2008. Eventually, he would go to the Czech League, where he would play till 2014 with HC Plzeň, and then he retired then. So, a very underrated player. I wish he would have stayed in the NHL a lot longer. He was a great speedster, as you can see, only 5'9", 180 pounds as well. So that is Martin Straka. Now on the right wing, we got Tom Fitzgerald, who could also play center. He played center a couple games in the Stanley Cup Finals. He played with 7 different teams over his 19 years in the NHL, including Florida, the Islanders, Nashville, Toronto, Boston, Chicago, and also the Colorado Avalanche for only one season. He was also more of a grinder kind of defensive player. He didn't have a lot of goals, I think, in his career, but he was just more of a defensive player. Like I said, a lot of these guys on the Panthers were more defensive. Maybe that's why they lost the series too. Now on the fourth line here, we got Mike Ho, I think it's pronounced. Not 100% sure with that. But Mike Ho was another one of those type of grinding defensive players as well. He played 707 games in the NHL with Quebec, Florida, and the Islanders. He could produce decently offensively and always physically. He was also a very good skater. That's what I remember, at least looking up at what they said. He was a really good skater. He had 675 penalty minutes, 256 points when he retired in 1999. Then at center here, we got Brian Skrudland, who was also in 3 other Stanley Cup Finals, I think. Yeah, 3 other Stanley Cup Finals. He won 2 of his 4 attempts in the finals, including once with the Montreal Canadiens, which he scored the game-winning goal in 85-86 against the Calgary Flames. And then also he won the cup with the Dallas Stars in 1999, as you guys would have seen back in the rematch. He was the captain of the team back in these days, and he came close to winning another cup here. Unfortunately, he didn't get it done. Then on the right wing here, you got Jody Hull. Jody Hull was a pretty solid two-way player. He didn't take a lot of penalty minutes either, as during his entire career, which lasted 831 games, he only had 150 penalty minutes. So the guy was probably taking an average of, like, I'd say maybe 30, 20 penalty minutes a season. I don't know. I can't think of it off the top of my head. But he went to the Stanley Cup Finals actually the next season after this, as well as a member of the Philadelphia Flyers, where he would lose to the Detroit Red Wings. He was also a head coach of the Peterborough Petes in the OHL for 5 seasons. Now to start off this scratch forwards, we got Radek Dvorak, who was just in our last episode as a member of the Edmonton Oilers. He, like I said, in the Edmonton Oilers series, he was a pretty good defensive player, but he could also produce offensively. He was 28 in the last Stanley Cup Finals, but this is 10 years before. He was only an 18-year-old, and he didn't actually get much time to play in the finals. He only got to play 1 of the 4 Stanley Cup Finals games, and he didn't win a Stanley Cup, I don't think, ever before he retired. So still not a bad career for Radek Dvorak. And then we got Steve Washburn, who, this guy played less than 100 games in the NHL, 93 to be exact. He put up 29 points, which is pretty respectable. And then he also put up 42 penalty minutes. So I didn't know really what to make this guy, because he didn't get to play that much, and he put up a decent amount of points for the amount of games, and he put up penalty minutes, so I just put him as a grinder. I know he actually currently resides in Ottawa. I looked up him on Facebook for some weird reason, and I actually found him because like you can kind of tell it's him with the amount of like his eyebrows, how big they are, because if you look at the photo that's on HockeyDB, he has like really big eyebrows, and that's who he is in like the picture as well, so it's kind of funny. Now let's go on to the defensive core. Okay, starting off the defensive core, we got Ed Jovanovski. Ed Jovanovski spent most of his career with, well, Florida for a lot of it, and then also with the Vancouver Canucks too, so he was a very good defensive player. He could also throw a lot of hits, as he had, I think, over 1,000 penalty minutes in 1,126 games. He also had 500 points, so this guy could score too and put up assists, but he was more of a defensive player for the most part, I think. But I put him as a two-way defender. Then you got his defensive pairing partner, and that is Robert Schfela. So Robert Schfela spent most of his career with Florida. He came into the league as a 26-year-old, so he didn't get to play much time in the NHL. He retired only like 10 years later than that because he was already 35. He retired as a member of the Toronto Maple Leafs, but he was pretty solid offensively for the most part, as he had 335 points in 655 games between his two teams and 10 seasons. Now in the second pairing here, you got Paul Laus, and Paul Laus, more known as the enforcer for the playoffs. He got into a ton of fights, averaging about maybe 200 a season, always being in big fights and trying to solid up his team. He did have 9 assists though in the Stanley Cup playoffs, so he actually contributed in, but during the regular season, usually this guy would not put up that much points. Like I said, he was mostly in the box, so he couldn't get anything done offensively, but he was one of those good old enforcers from the good old days. Then we got his defensive partner, which is Gordon Murphy. And Gordon Murphy was another defensive defenseman. He could score as well, though, and put up assists. By the end of his career, he had 323 points in 862 games. He'd go on to retire in 2000, I think it was, and eventually he became a coach for the Columbus Blue Jackets, an assistant coach, from 2002 to 2010. So he was a pretty good assistant coach if he stayed around for 8 years. Then eventually he'd move on to being an assistant coach for the Florida Panthers, obviously just because he played for them. And then also another team he played for was the Flyers. He went on to assistant coach them from 2014 to the end of last season in the NHL. Then we got Rhett Warrener. Rhett Warrener was also in the Stanley Cup Finals in 1999 as a member of the Buffalo Sabres, but lost. And then also he was a member of the Calgary Flames in 2004, but lost. One of those defensive defensemen that don't put up a lot of points. And he was 0-for-3 in Cup Finals, so not the worst player, but not the best by any means. Then you got Terry Karkner. Terry Karkner is actually the third cousin of Matt Karkner of the Ottawa Senators from back in those days, like 2010-11. So it's kind of cool that his third cousin used to play in the NHL as well. Don't know how there's a pretty big age gap between the two of them, but yeah, third cousin is Terry Karkner. And he was also like Matt Karkner a lot, getting into fights and throwing hits and stuff like that. So, yeah, that's Terry Karkner. Now, on the scratch defenseman, we got Jason Woolley, who was also in the 1999 Stanley Cup Finals. A lot of repeated players. So, yeah, Jason Woolley was in that Cup Finals. He didn't get to play much, so he played 2 of the 4 games in the Stanley Cup Finals. Everybody else played all 4 games. That's why he's a scratch guy. He ended up, I don't know if he ended up winning a cup. He might have won a cup before, but I don't know. He spent his career with Washington, Detroit, Florida, Buffalo, and I think that's it. And then you also got Jeff Smith, who won the Stanley Cup as a member of the Edmonton Oilers back in 1989-90. But during this playoff run, he only played 1 game, so this guy was more as a depth guy, nothing important. That's why Evan was like a 77. So that's the scratch guys. Now onto the goaltenders. Okay, so starting off with the goaltenders here, we got John Van Beesbroek, aka the Beezer, like I was saying. John Van Beesbroek won the Vezina once during his career, and during the playoffs, he was the one that gave the Florida Panthers a chance to win that cup, as he went 12-10 with a .932 save percentage and a 2.25 goals against average per game. He played with the Rangers, the Panthers, the Flyers, the Islanders, and the Devils, so basically all the teams in the eastern United States almost. The sad thing for Van Beesbroek is in Game 2, where they lost 8-1, he let in 4 goals on 11 shots in the first period, so he was pulled for the remainder of the game, where Mark Fitzpatrick would play the rest of the game, and Fitzpatrick didn't play any better than him. He wasn't that good of a goaltender either, Fitzpatrick. He had a losing record during his career. He went 113 136 and 49 during his 250 or 300 games in the NHL. He had an .896 save percentage and a 3.12 goals against average, so maybe that wasn't that bad considering how the time was back in those days. A lot of players scoring, but he was still not the greatest, to be honest. So yeah, that is Mark Fitzpatrick and the goaltenders and the Florida Panthers. So now let's flip on over to the Colorado Avalanche. Okay, so here are the lines for the Colorado Avalanche. So starting off on the left side here, we got Valeri Kamensky, who was pretty underrated. He came into the NHL as a 25-year-old and only played 10 seasons, basically the same thing as Robert Schfela. He spent most of his time in like Russia or something before coming to the NHL eventually, but he was a very good player, especially this season. Like, he got a career total like best of 38 goals, 47 assists for 85 points in 81 games during the regular season. He was very good, and I think he got under players. He got under the skin of players too in the playoffs, at least in the finals. I saw some things where he was shoving players and stuff like that, so maybe he was a bit of an enforcer, well, not an enforcer, kind of grinder guy as well. I don't know exactly, but that is Valeri Kamensky. Then you all know this guy, Peter Forsberg. Forsberg was completely a beast this season. He was only 22 and he put up 116 points in the regular season, but that was only the 5th best in the league. Like, it's crazy how good the players were back in those days. Mario Lemieux led the NHL at this point in time with 161 points during the regular season. So that line of Yager, Lemieux, Ron Francis was together at the time. So yeah, basically the NHL was pretty crazy for points. You could see why goalies had bad statistics during the regular season. That's Forsberg, and then you got Claude Lemieux. Claude Lemieux was, I don't think, any relation to Mario Lemieux. I don't think he was at all. Claude Lemieux won 4 Stanley Cups with 3 different teams, including once with Montreal and Colorado, and then twice with the New Jersey Devils. Second line here, you got Stefan Yell. Stefan Yell also went to the Cup Finals in 2001 with the Colorado Avalanche and won. And in 2004, he also went to the Cup Finals with the Calgary Flames, but lost. So he won 2 of 3 Stanley Cups. Pretty decent defensive player. He also produced somewhat offensively, but more was a defensive player for the most part. Then you got Burnaby Joe and Joe Sakic. Obviously, Joe Sakic is probably one of the greatest Colorado Avalanche players of all time, respectively, as he had over 600 goals by the end of his career. During this regular season, he had 120 points in 82 games. And in the playoffs, he played just as good, putting up 34 points, including 18 goals, which is, I don't know if it's still a career, like a world record, but I think it is. Like, he had 18 goals during the playoffs, 34 points in 22 games. So this guy was putting up, like, I think in the finals, he was over a point per game. Like, he had like 6 or 7 points in 4 games. Like, this guy was an absolute animal back in those days. Then you had Adam Denmarsh, who was also a, He could score, but he was also more of a power forward guy. He got a lot of penalty minutes as well, but he had a very short career. I don't know why. I couldn't look into that. Like, I didn't see why he retired so young. I don't know if he had injury problems, but this guy only played 567 games where he retired at age 27. And he had 373 points in his career too, so I don't know if he ran into concussion problems or he wanted to follow some like new job or something. But yeah, Adam Denmarsh is that guy. Then you got Dave Hannon, who also won the Stanley Cup with the Edmonton Oilers in 1988. He's more of a bottom six guy. He's nothing too special. He had a decent amount of points back in his early days with like Buffalo and whatnot, but after that he was more of a bottom 6 defensive player. Then you got Mike Ricci, who came over from the Philadelphia Flyers in the trade, that like the Eric Lindros deal. He was part of that deal. So yeah, Mike Ricci was a good grinder. He could put up points as well. I think he had like 700 points by the end of his career. He played over 1,000 games too, and he retired in 2007 as a member of the Phoenix Coyotes. Then you got Scott Young, who was a pretty underrated player for the most part, as during his entire career here, once I get the stats, he put up 757 points in 1,181 games. So another one of those good players that put up like 700 points in 1,000 games that don't get noticed. He spent 10 years in the NHL with the Hartford Whalers, the Pittsburgh Penguins, Quebec Nordiques / Colorado, and then St. Louis and Dallas. He actually won the Stanley Cup as a member of the 1991 Pittsburgh Penguins. And on the 4th line here, you got Warren Reichel, who is the father of Kirby Reichel. He was an enforcer by a lot. He also put up like 200, 300 penalty minutes a season, was always in the box, so he didn't produce much, but he did go to the Cup Finals as a member of the Los Angeles Kings in 1993. He actually had 1,422 penalty minutes in only 406 career games. Then at center, you got a winger, and that is Rene Corbett. Rene Corbett wasn't the most offensive threat during his career. However, during the playoffs, he put up 5 points in 8 games to help the Avs win their first ever championship. So he was a key contributor. I think in the finals, he had like a 2-assist game once. Don't remember for sure. Then on the right wing, you got another player from our Stanley Cup Finals rematch in '99. That is Mike Keane. Mike Keane actually won 3 Stanley Cups in his career, once with the Montreal Canadiens in 1993, once with the Avalanche here in '96, and once with the Dallas Stars in '99. Okay, so now that we are done the forwards, I think we have some scratch forwards. Yeah, we do. So we got first up Chris Simon. A lot of players, people don't like him. Players don't like him either. This guy was suspended a total of 8 times in his career, and he missed 65 games because of those suspensions. So most notably, he was known for a racial slur against Mike Greer. He was also a player that high-sticked. I forget who he high-sticked, but I think he high-sticked the player back in like 2008 with the Islanders. But yeah, he basically went on to the KHL eventually and retired there. But he was solid offensively for the most part back in those days. But this guy was more of one of those players you just don't want to have on your team because he's just one of those dicks, kind of, you could say. So yeah, and he's 6'3", 233. So that is Chris Simon. And then you got Troy Murray, who was actually pretty good during his early years in the NHL. He actually had one season where he put up 45 goals in 1986 with the Chicago Blackhawks. But by the end of his career, which is around now, he was more of a bottom 6 defensive player, not producing much offense. So that is Troy Murray. Okay, now into the defensive core for the Colorado Avalanche. We got Sylvain Lefebvre. Sylvain Lefebvre was a very good defensive player. He could block shots, play good on the penalty kill. He didn't score a lot either, but one thing that is really odd about the Stanley Cup Finals is, I guess, when he had his day with the cup, he actually got his son baptized in the Stanley Cup. So Sylvain Lefebvre, and then you got Uwe Krupp. Uwe Krupp had the Stanley Cup winning goal, as I was saying earlier. He actually was a very good player in the Stanley Cup Finals. A lot of people don't realize how good he was. He actually had, I think, 15 points. He had 16 points in 22 games in the Stanley Cup run, which helped him get the Stanley Cup victory. During the rest of his career, though, he didn't produce much offensively, but he is actually in the IIHF Hall of Fame, I think, just because he's one of the best German players to ever play. He also won a cup as kind of like a depth guy for Detroit in 2002. Then on the second pairing, you got Sandis Ozolinsh. Sandis Ozolinsh came over from the San Jose Sharks and was almost a point per game. So he put up like 50-something points during the regular season in 60-something games, and he was a key contributor to helping the Colorado Avalanche win the Stanley Cup. I think he had almost a point per game in the playoffs as well, so this guy was a very good offensive defenseman. He was also pretty young at this stage. Too bad Colorado didn't hold him onto him for that long. Eventually he would go on to playing with Carolina and in Anaheim. Then his defense partner, you got Adam Foote. A lot of you guys should know Adam Foote. He is Cal Foote's father, who is a Tampa Bay Lightning prospect. Adam Foote was not the biggest threat offensively. He had like 200 and something points, I think, by the end of his career. But he played over 1,000 games. He was just one of those solid defensive players. Could throw huge hits, could block shots, all that type of stuff. Then you got Alexei Gusarov. Gusarov had like 9 assists in the Stanley Cup Finals, so he was decent offensively then, but he had a really short career and didn't produce much during the regular season. I think he eventually retired in like 1999 or 2000, but he had a really short career for the most part. Then his defense partner, you got another defensive defenseman in John Clem. Clem actually had 2 goals in game number 1 of this finals. He was a scratch for a lot of the playoffs as well, because Curtis Lozichin actually played a lot more than he did in the playoffs. But yeah, John Clem was just another solid defensive player. He could also produce decently offensively, but he was more of a defensive defenseman. Now into the scratch defenseman, we got Craig Wolanin, who is Christian Wolanin's father. So a lot of fathers on this Avalanche team. Christian Wolanin is a Sens prospect, if you guys don't know. So Craig Wolanin was more of a, he could produce offensively, but they were using him as a depth guy in the playoffs a lot. I think he only played maybe 7 games in the entire playoff run, maybe less than that even. But yeah, he was scratched for the entire finals, I think, or maybe he played 1 game. And then finally, you got Curtis Lozichin. I remember this guy just being a really good defensive player as well. He didn't take a lot of penalty minutes either. When I started watching hockey back in 2003, I would think it was 2003-04, Curtis Lozichin was a member of the Senators. I think I actually got to meet him because I have a signed card of his. So He was, yeah, like I said, a very good defensive player that you could put on your penalty kill, and that's why I have him as an 80. And now finally onto the goaltenders for the Colorado Avalanche. We got Patrick Waugh. Patrick Waugh, obviously a lot of you guys know him. You should all know him. He was one of the greatest goaltenders during the 90s, up there with Martin Brodeur, Dominik Hasek, maybe Ed Belfour, those type of guys. Patrick Waugh was a beast in the playoffs, especially in the Stanley Cup final where he had that 63 save performance in Game 4 to win the Stanley Cup. Surprisingly, he didn't take home the Conn Smythe because Joe Sakic, who obviously was a very good offensive player in the finals and the entire playoffs, managed to take it instead. And then back up, you got Stefan Fiset. Stefan Fiset was actually a member of the Nordiques as well back in the season before. Not the greatest player, but he actually played solid during the regular season. I don't remember his exact record because I didn't jot it down, but I think he was like 20-something, 8-5 or something. So he got a decent amount of points done. And then eventually when Waugh came over, it was pretty automatic that Colorado was going to be a playoff team. So that is the Colorado Avalanche and the Florida Panthers lines. Now let's get into our Stanley Cup Finals simulation. Okay, here we are up with the 1996 Stanley Cup Finals rematch. So Colorado and Florida. Colorado has home ice just as they did back in those days. So let's get into game 1. If a team has a chance to win the Stanley Cup, we will watch the celebration, obviously. So first period, and it is a 1-0 or 1-1 game, my bad, for Colorado and Florida. So Sakic opens the scoring, not a surprise considering, like I said, he had 34 points during the entire playoff run. Stu Barnes, though, answers right back, and, well, not right back, like 11 minutes later, and shots are in favor of Colorado, 11-9. Second period, and it's a 3-2 game for Colorado now. Scott Young makes it 2-1. Niedermeyer answers right back, but Mike Keane comes through with a goal. Let's see if Colorado could lock it down here in the third, or is Florida going to come back and tie it up? Colorado's still out shooting them, penalty kill for them, and they managed to do it. And time is winding down here, 30 shots to 20 almost. And the Colorado Avalanche are going to take game 1 by a score of 3. So the Colorado Avalanche managed to prevail and win 3-2. Shots were 28-23 in favor of Colorado. So I think that's actually pretty decently accurate to the game 1 that happened in real life. I think it was like a close game like that. So Sakic from Kamensky and Young, Barnes from Lowry and Shepard, Young from Ricci, Niedermeyer from Mellenby, and Keane from nobody. So Mike Keane gets the game winner. 3 stars in game 1. Scott Young with 2 points. Keane with 1 goal in 4 hits gets 2nd star. And Patrick Waugh, playing great, gets the 3rd star. So Colorado takes a 1-0 series lead. Won't be surprised if they win all 3 games, considering their roster is a lot better than theirs. Colorado, I think I have them as like a 92 overall in comparison to Florida's 89. So Colorado should be able to win the series, but you never know. First period of game 2, and it's a 1-0 lead for Colorado. Mike Keane, who had a goal last game, comes through, and it's a 1-0. Shots 13-10. Second period, still 1-0. So Patrick Waugh's lights out currently in the rest of the series so far. Mike Keane's leading the league in goals, which is weird. Getting to the last 10 minutes of the third, Florida needs to get stuff going or else they're going to lose just like they did back in 96. Shots are in Florida's favor though. Colorado keeping the puck out of the net, and Florida with a late power play, but it's a 1-0 win for the Colorado Avalanche in game 2. So game 2 was a lot closer than it was in real life. Like I said, game 2 was that one where Colorado won 8-1. Forsberg had a hat trick that night. Clem had 2 goals, and I think there was another player that had 2 goals, and somebody else had 1 goal. I don't even remember. There was a lot of goal scoring in that game. So 3 stars, Patrick Waugh, John Van Beesbrook, and Mike Keane. So pretty realistic simulation we're having here so far. Hopefully Colorado could take both of these games, and then we have like a completely accurate simulation. But game 3 in Florida at the Miami Arena, first period, and Colorado once again has opened the scoring. So Florida's just not being able to score. Actually, during this Stanley Cup Finals in 1996, Florida only had first period goals. They did not score in the second or the third. They only had first period goals. So that's why they lost the series. It's just because they couldn't get it done in the other period. So this is pretty realistic. Shots are 9-8 in favor of Colorado. Second period, 2-0 Colorado now as Valeri Kamensky gets the first line a goal. Shots are 23-15 in favor of Colorado. Let's see if they could lock it down here in the third, like last game, and have a chance to sweep. And Sandis Ozolinsh is going to make it 3-0. Yeah, this Colorado team is way too good for Florida. Florida gets on the board. Their leading goal scorer during the playoffs, Dave Lowry, makes it a 3-1 game. Florida is now on the power play. Actually, also back in these finals, I forgot to mention, Florida had a really big rat craze. Whenever they would score, they would throw plastic rats on the ice. So it'd be kind of interesting to see if Florida could get back to the finals again one day. So Mike Ricci got an extra goal, and it was a 4-1 win for Colorado, and they have a chance to sweep the Florida Panthers just like they did back in '96. So Yell from Young and Sakic, Kamensky from Sakic, Ozolinsh from Forsberg, and Ricci from Young, and Lowry from whoever that was. 3 stars in that game: Patrick Waugh, first star again, Young the second star, and Sakic the third. So currently looks like maybe Patrick Waugh might win the Conn Smythe. Or how much points does Sakic have so far? Young's currently leading the way for points. Sakic's got 3 points. If Sakic could have a really good game for number 4, maybe Colorado will end up winning. Or, well, not Colorado would end up winning. Sakic might end up winning instead of Sakic. And just in case Colorado has a chance to win, so Hannon makes it 1-0. Third liner coming through with a goal. You know what, actually, we're gonna slow some in the third period. Young makes it 2-0. It looks like Colorado might sweep them like they did in real life, so we might get 3 straight sweeps to start off this series, which is really weird. So, also, guys, next episode I forgot to mention quickly is the 2009 Stanley Cup Finals rematch between the Detroit Red Wings and the Pittsburgh Penguins. That was the popular vote on Twitter. Next episode after that, though, I'll probably put a poll out pretty soon on what you guys want to see for the next episode after that. And that could be anything from, like I said, 1980s or even earlier onwards. So if you guys want to see, like I said, 1985 with Oilers, I don't know, 1983 with the Islanders. If you'd like to even see like 93 with the Montreal Canadiens and LA Kings, that sort of thing, just let me know any of them on Twitter or down below in the comments, and then I'll choose maybe the best decision. I also would like to do the 2007 finals between the Sens and the Ducks, so let me know any of them that you guys would like to see, and eventually, like the most common result, I'll pick that one instead. So anyways, let's get back to our simulation. So second period, and Colorado still up 2-0. Looks like Colorado might go on to win the Stanley Cup in 4. Last 5 minutes of the game, we'll go into it and watch it. Yeah, I think, maybe less than that. Still 2-0. Let's just slow this down a bit because it's in the last 10 minutes of the game. Looks like Colorado is going to take a cup. Yui Krupa is nowhere in the Stanley Cup Finals. Unfortunately, I wanted Krupa to score like a game-winning goal to make it more realistic, but whatever. Last 3 minutes here, we're going to intervene now and watch the remaining 1 minute and whatever it was the Stanley Cup Finals. So pretty accurate simulation, I'd say, for the most part. I'll let you guys watch the remainder of the game, and then I guess we'll do a little bit of a wrap-up, and then I'll be it for this video. So see you guys at the end.
If you're just with us, it's been a tremendous bit of hockey so far, and more to come. The Panthers with a center ice face-off win. Gains the blue line. Good centering pass to the slot. Puck covered, whistle blown. They win the draw. Let's see if it pays off. That one is pointed to him. Muscled right off. The Avs wheel one ahead up the wing. Takes that pass from the other point. Lets it go. Save. And another save. Mark him down for one more. Picked up by the defense. Nearing the final minute of regulation. What a strong wrist shot. Florida's pulling their goalie for the extra man. Moving it on up the wing. Net open. No completion on that pass thanks to the stick. Florida's on the move through the neutral zone. It's dumped in. Pitching it to Crew. Colorado's lugging it along in neutral ice. Net empty. Score!
That empty net goal will send the fans to the exits.
That's going to be too much for them to come back from. That empty net or will seal the deal.
And they take that neutral zone face-off. Slid to Murphy. Oh, that's a nice cut pass. Let's see what happens.
Colorado's in complete control of this game because of their ability to force turnovers.
Puck skipped away. He was knocked down. And now it's directed to Lau. Trying to go to Lynn. From childhood, the daydream of getting to hold 35 pounds of history, and it's about to come true. They will win the biggest prize. And the game is over. The series is over. Colorado's won the Stanley Cup. Do you believe the celebration going on?
They've been injured, they've been banged up, they've been beaten down, yet they have always been able to dig deep and find a character that only Stanley Cup champions have. This has long been a tradition, of course, in hockey where sportsmanship replaces the competition that has just been completed. You shake hands, and I'll tell you from experience, it's better to be on the winning side of that handshake than on the losing side.
The playoff MVP gets the Conn Smythe Trophy, and here is the winner.
There's always a little bit of an odd feeling when the Conn Smythe Trophy is handed out because it's an individual award when everybody is here to see the best trophy in sports presented, and that will come next.
It's often said it's the hardest prize to win because it takes 8 weeks. And by tradition, the captain is the first to hold it high.
He's often acknowledged to be one of the best captains in all of sport. To be the leader of a championship team is one thing. To be held on a different level as he is quite another. As long as the Stanley Cup has been presented on the ice, and then the players have made a victory lap with it, there's been a pecking order as to how the cup is handed off. Nobody really talks about it. It just organically happens. But everybody knows there's a seniority to the way that this 30-pound trophy is presented player to player.
You play that hard and that long. You get your names on a trophy, rings on your fingers, and one last photograph. Evidence of it all.
So there you guys have it. The Colorado Avalanche win the Stanley Cup. So Patrick Waugh wins the Conn Smythe. He had like a .99 goals against average. Pretty decently accurate. And then also Joe Sakic got the empty netter in the clinching game. So there's a look at the 3 stars, Waugh, Van Beesbrook, and Hannon. So let's just quickly take a look at the player stats to see how close they were to the actual playoff stats. But we'll just look at the playoff stats anyways. They'll actually do like a what was I gonna say now? Anyways, we're gonna look at the player stats just to see, because I didn't show that for like the last 2 videos, I don't think. So Young had the most points out of everybody on that third line. Interesting. Sakic had a point per game and all that sort of stuff. Let's just check the goalie stats. How good did Van Beesbrook even play on that loss? I think pretty good. Yeah, so Van Beesbrook still had a very good look at the pretty good stats and several goals against, but Patrick Waugh looked 4-0, 971 save percentage, a .81 goals against per game on average. I think he had 2 shutouts, I believe. Yeah, 2 shutouts, so pretty good simulation there. So anyways, guys, that's going to do it for this episode of our Stanley Cup Finals rematch series. So in the next episode, we're going to do the 09 finals between the Pens and the Red Wings. So see you guys then.